folks is we have two groups. We have the new editors cohort, people who became top editors newly over the last few months. And we have the Leadership Academy, people who are on track in their next job to be in a position similar to that. So we've got a guest speaker today, Mary Irby-Jones. She's the executive editor of the Courier-Journal in Louisville, the Pulitzer Prize winning Courier Journal. And she was both in the Leadership Academy and the new editors cohort in the last year. She became editor in Jackson, Mississippi. Then she got a promotion to go to Louisville. She is on the fast track. And I think you would agree, Mary, that you would be in the top 1% of extroverts as well, wouldn't you? Yes, yes. And so it was her idea to speak on this topic, which in her words were something along the lines of how I learned to listen by zipping my mouth. And so I personally could use this advice as well. So Mary, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we're all ears, and I'll monitor the chat in case there's questions along the way.
Thank you. Mackenzie, you should have screened this presentation for the curse words. I apologize in advance. No, hi, everyone. I will start off by saying I am an extreme extrovert and I do love to talk, but I don't like to be the focal point of attention, if you can imagine such a thing. So doing presentations are not actually something I love, but I felt like I had something I could give back, just because I've had to really learn to listen to people. And I'm still actually practicing what I'm about to share with you, because I do love to talk and I love to give people my opinions. And so what I'll ask of you as we go through this is that we have a conversation instead of me trying to do a presentation and talk down, talk to you. And so at various points, and hopefully Mackenzie will jump in because he's really good about mediating and facilitating conversations, we can stop and pause and really just share some advice and opinion and some experiences that you have that would be relevant to this conversation, so that even I, who like to talk, can listen some. So I can get back here. Give me 1 second and I will share my screen. All right, can you guys see that? No, where did it go? Sorry about that. All right. Nothing is working.
So Mary, what you shared is your screen, so we see ourselves.
Oh, I love it.
And this is a very introspective program, but I think we'd rather see the deck that you prepared.
Yeah, and I am clicking on the deck, which is what is supposed to happen, but it is not showing the deck for some reason.
Stop sharing.
Okay.
Let's see.
Hold on one second.
The X right next to the lead. Yep, there you go.
Yeah, I got it. It's just, okay, let me try again. Now?
Not yet. Not seeing it yet.
Uh,
Send it to me. I'll do it.
Okay, let me share it with you. I'm having some problems because I'm in the office, and this may be the problem, in which case I apologize. It is not letting me really sign in to Microsoft. And I have been trying for 15 minutes and it's still not letting me. Hold on 1 second. This is why I should have shared this with you earlier, and I apologize.
It's all good. Lesson 1, improvise.
I can definitely improvise and share it later. All right. Now can you see it? Let me try it one more time. Now? No? All right. I give up.
Just email it to me and I'll get it up on the screen.
Well, the problem is I'm in the office and it is not cooperating.
We're getting close.
No. Yeah, it's not letting us see the presentation because I don't.
There you go. It's there.
Is it? Yay!
Yep. We've got it.
Perseverance.
I thought I was going to be a emerging leader dropout here. Okay, here we go. Hi, Kristen. She's laughing. All right, here we go. So I'm going to talk to you guys about listening. And my title was Listening Effectively, How to Learn to Stop Talking So I Can Hear Others. And it is, as I said before, a really big challenge for me. Mackenzie knows I've done several of the leadership studies, and on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm definitely like the highest extrovert you can be. And so obviously when you're that kind of person, what you like to do more than anything else is engage with people and talk to people. But sometimes you also dominate conversations, which I'm really good about doing. And I'm also not good about letting people who are quiet have time to speak. And so I've really had to work on that because, in the workplace, you end up with people on all ends of the spectrum. You end up with people who are like yourself, and those are people you really have a ball with, right? You end up with that person in your office for an hour, and then you have someone who's really quiet, who has a lot to contribute to the newsroom, but that person doesn't really get to have good conversations with you because you're dominating the conversation. I've been a manager for a long time, and it is something that I really have had to practice. And then I'm also really bad about having my own thoughts and opinions about things and wanting to place that on people. But just let me start off by saying it's an honor to be here, and thank you all for allowing me to practice for my TED Talk, because one day I'm going to do one. And this is like a tiny first step, like just talking to my peers and coworkers and folks I know where I feel comfortable. So like Mackenzie said up front, I am an extreme extrovert, and as I said before, I don't really enjoy public speaking. So if you guys would feel free to ask questions and share your stories and advice, that would help us have a really great conversation. So because I had to prepare the slide, I also don't like to do presentations. I thought I would just pull up what the definition of listening is. And what I found interesting about this is that there's a study that shows that we spend 70 to 80% of our time in some form of communication. And of that time, we spend about 9% writing, 16% reading, 30% talking. And I did not notice, but we spend 45% of our time listening. And so once you think about like how important listening is on the communication spectrum, it makes it more important that we practice being good listeners. And like I said, even though I'm talking to you about this, in truth, I am still practicing. Are we really listening? Research shows that only about 10% of us really listen effectively. I'm probably in the 90% who doesn't, but I'm practicing. Listening is more, there's a quote that I picked up off the internet as I was Googling and searching. I really like this quote, and it's talking about, when you listen, the outcome is, you start to, learn things about ourselves and other people. And so listening is a really great habit to have. I will share with you all that right now, one of the things that I'm doing in the way of listening is I became the editor here at the CJ in February. And so I am spending time now talking to the staff. I started with the managers and I'm doing one-on-ones with the staff. And I can tell you that employing these listening skills, because we're remote, we're not in the office. And so you only get a limited amount of time, to try and get to know people. So it's been really important that I listen. So I've prepared for this with 4 questions. I asked the group, what are you good at? What are you passionate about? And the other question I asked them about themselves is, what do you want to grow? What is something you want to do in 2021? What do you want to work on? And that question is important for me in the way of like really understanding and listening to the staff is around training and development and making sure that people know that I'm vested in their growth and development. The other thing I asked them, and this some people don't answer this question. I don't think they've really thought about it, but what's our newsroom good at? This is really useful for me as I begin to figure out like where our strengths and weaknesses are. And then I asked them, what does our newsroom need to work on? What do we need to grow and develop? And that's not a question to like, I'm not looking for like negative things about our newsroom as much as I'm trying to learn like, what does the staff think we need to work on? Um, Even when I became editor of Jackson, I had been there 9 months when I became editor, and I had a lot of opinions about a lot of things that we needed to do, but I had not had that conversation with the staff, and it was really refreshing to know that the staff kind of mirrored the same things that I thought we needed to work on in the newsroom, and so it gave me a good vantage point to start figuring out how we move forward as a newsroom, as you know, under my, you know, with me being editor. And so I would encourage you all to, you know, to have those conversations with staff. The one thing I will say in the way of listening is my very first person was a reporter here. And, you know, we all have these assumptions about reporters, and I fell into this trap that they're talkative, they're outgoing, they got a lot to say. The very first reporter I got here was the exact opposite. Like from the beginning, you could tell she was very uncomfortable with this conversation. And it was a challenge for me because when people are not comfortable, I try to compensate, I try to fill in for them. And so I just was like, I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I just was like, you're going to ask her questions, but not a lot of questions, and then you're going to listen to what she tells you. And she said something to me that was really interesting, and I had to be listening to really understand what she was saying. She says, well, you know, one of the things is communication. And she's like, our newsroom has a communication problem. And I said, what do you mean? I was thinking she was going to say, like, you need to do a better job of telling us what the newsroom is doing. And she said, well, I don't really hear from my editor that much. And then she said, but I'm okay with it because I really don't like to be, you know, for them to really talk to me that much. But at the end of the day, what I took away from that conversation is that she really wasn't having, and in the middle of the pandemic, is that even though she's an introvert and really wants to be left alone and she enjoys that, she brought that up because that is something that's on her mind and that's important to her. And so, because I just didn't like dominate that conversation, and I kind of just, when she said communication was an issue, I could have assumed, like I did in my mind, assume what she was talking about, but I took that extra step of actually asking her what she meant. And so that was something that was useful to me and helped remind me of how important it is that we really listen to people and not fill in blanks for them. So that's a story that I had. Does anybody want to share something that they had recently?
Yeah, Mary, I want to call on Lauren Blankenship on that question here in a moment. But before we do, I think we got a little risk that your screen is still being shared, and you might be working on somebody's review there that we don't want everybody to see. So yeah, let's just hit stop sharing, and or maybe I'll there. Okay, you're back. You're back.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to. You know what I'm doing? I'm trying to look at everybody, and I guess I need to just stop. Okay, here we go.
I'll look for you. So let's hear from Lauren.
I forgot what I said.
I'll read it
Which
to you.
part?
You
Okay,
said,
great.
yeah, post therapy, I see the opportunity in silence, but I have to work really hard at letting it be because I'll just be talking at a wall. What were you what did you have on your mind there?
Oh, like there really is. I feel if you leave silence, there's room to grow, reflect. Things will come up. But like for me, I know that that's a positive thing and that I should try and use it. But it's against my nature to not fill the silence. So like I know that I should try and utilize letting the silence be, but I really will just, I mean, I like to talk a lot.
Right, right. Mary, we've got 3 more people in the queue, so let me just go to Gary, then Damien, then Stan. Gary, share with us your thought.
Oh, I think I wrote that there's a lot of greatness that happens in silence. So the same as the people. I try to meet people where they are. Well, we all try to do that. So that doesn't mean throwing a bunch of words in a sentence just for the sake of doing it. If as long as it's productive, you can be as silent as you want. If I'm explaining that correctly. So just meeting people where they want. We don't. Some people will throw a bunch of words in a sentence. Some people will speak when they're ready to when they have something to say. However, whatever your process is for communicating and working through things, I'll meet you there.
So what do you do, Gary, when you have someone who's really not very talkative? When you say, what does it mean? Like when you say you meet them where they are, how do you navigate that conversation with them then?
So in team meetings, what I've done so far in Clarksville, everybody knows they're gonna talk, and I say that in not a forceful way. They have the ability to, like, the meeting's not over until we. Let me back up a second. Every meeting ends with someone saying, "Hey, Alexis, do you have anything else? Hey, Jimmy, what do you have?" Like I allow them to feel like they're in control of the meeting, like they have a say, and it's not just me as the boss, of, playing teacher and student. So treating everybody like peers, like adults. So far, that has worked pretty good, and it's so much that they're now show up at meetings not just ready to take notes about what I'm going to say, but they're ready to talk about what they think we all need to say. So that one thing so far has worked pretty good.
Really good. Let's, Mary, I want to make sure we get to Damien and Stan before we move on. So Damien, a self-identified introvert. What do you have to share on this topic?
Yeah, I'm a total introvert, and even calling a source makes me nervous. And my approach generally is to kind of let subjects talk, because I think that those awkward silences let them talk themselves into something that they wouldn't have said otherwise.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's could be turned around to the other person feeling like, well, I better feel this.
I've gotta feel the silence, certainly.
Very good. Stan Wilson and then Whitman after that.
Yeah, I guess what I was referring to is the whole idea of essentially, people, myself included, I definitely feel a lot more comfortable with silence, especially in either a smaller group or somebody I'm mostly familiar with. Alternatively, setting the stage for trustworthiness, signaling trustworthiness, either preemptively in the conversation or during the conversation. And also, what can be disregarded is establishing a rapport before you even have to have a conversation with somebody. So a lot of this stuff is just work that just takes place continually. So when it comes time to have regular conversations or even sensitive conversations, people feel comfortable. So yeah, that's my take. So far, this has been really awesome. By the way,
Stan, great points there. In the moment, setting aside the homework that you said we have to do to build trust and credibility with a person, in the moment, are there any nonverbal cues of trustworthiness that you lean on and that others could take from you?
Well, what I try to do is just really pay attention, and really kind of stay in the moment as far as like not doing, like Mary called it out earlier, where a lot of folks just think about what they're saying next before while while you're supposed to be listening. So I really trying to stay in the moment, eye contact, all the physical indications that you're paying attention, and what especially to what someone is saying, understanding it's important. So it's a practice. Obviously, sometimes fall short just like everybody else, but it's definitely something I aspire to do with every conversation.
Thanks for sharing that. And then one final word here, Mary, before we move on to your next segment, and that's Whitman. And you have a lovely story to share from your personal life.
Yeah, I've just known a handful of people in my life, I think, that are remarkably good at being silent, and it's just important to take that lesson from them. I had a friend in high school that would come over and wouldn't speak at all. And it was very alienating and challenging to spend time with someone who wouldn't engage. He always came back. He's invited me to his wedding. Throughout my life, even in my professional life now, I have coworkers that I think are much more comfortable being quiet, but just I found being quiet with them very challenging, but ultimately very rewarding as well.
So what do you get from the silence? I mean, what happens as a result of that?
I think a level of trust, it creates there's all different kinds of communication, I guess. Some people want to talk through things. Some people just want to be, in the same room with someone without maybe having to talk through a bunch of things, talk through everything all the time, and creating that space where they're feeling a connection, maybe just not verbally, I think has really strengthened a number of the relationships I've had.
Thank you.
That's great. And Mary, Matt LeClaire shared a pro tip about kind of getting electronics out of the conversation, setting the phone and the watch to one side. And there's a lot of subscribers based on the thumbs up and heart marks, heart emojis there. So we'll turn it back to you, Mary, for your next series of thoughts.
Okay. Well, first, let me just say I have a lot of growing to do because I don't think I could sit anywhere quietly with other people in the room with me. I will have to practice that. I don't know what that looks like. So that's a challenge and a growth area. So thank you for sharing that vision. It frightens me, honestly, to even think about it. But, as we grow and develop personally, it's great for us to have these perspectives. Let me just share a little bit about me personally. I grew up with a brother and 3 sisters and a load of cousins and aunts and uncles. And so in my family, we talked over each other. We'll take over someone's story and finish it for them. We finish each other's sentences. And my son grew up away from my family, and I think he sometimes finds holidays to be a challenge for him because we are so animated and we get so worked up. And so when you come from that kind of environment, I had to also really teach myself that that kind of behavior is not acceptable outside of my family and certainly not acceptable in the workplace. And so just to paint you guys a picture, and I hope there's someone out there who can relate and who can appreciate just how challenging it is to really listen to other people when you haven't had to do that. And so I just want to talk a little bit, just mention a few things about this 10% of us listening and why that number may be so low. And someone mentioned technology, and I do think that that is a big deal. And now we just have so much technology, if we're not just playing with our phone or playing a game or whatever we can get distracted with is social media. And then the other thing, and we've talked about this too, that makes us not effective listeners is that we are ready to jump in with our own story or advice when other people are sharing and talking. And those things are a challenge and reason why it's only 10% of us who do this effectively. So here's a little bit about what I had to learn. Self-awareness was the big first thing for me. Like I had to really realize that it really is inappropriate to talk all over people. And I had to realize that I actually had this problem because, well, to me, it's just having a conversation. And if you're an extreme extrovert like me, it really is just dominating an entire conversation and not allowing people to have, to be able to share their points of views or what they know and what they learn. And, I'm aware that I love to talk, and I'm aware that I'm uncomfortable with silence. And I'm also aware that I have an opinion about everything and a desire to fix everyone else's problems. And thankfully, I have a group of friends who, not all of my friends, thankfully, are extroverts. I have some friends who are introverts, and I've, through the years, with those relationships, have learned how to really um, dial it back, if you will, and allow them to have some space to talk about what they need to talk about. I don't know how many of you have experienced it where you can, ask someone how their day, how was your day? And before, they'll go on and on and on and never even, ask you how your day is. Or you can be sharing something with them and the conversation quickly becomes about them when you really do need to talk to them about something. And the other thing that I had to learn was patience. And that goes to the not filling in sentences for people, allowing people to find their own words, being very patient when someone is taking a long time to tell you something, especially when you're busy. One way that really can be an issue in the newsroom when we're back, or even on a Zoom call, for that matter, in a meeting, is allowing someone to find the right words and to be able to express themselves. Because sometimes when we're in the moment, you can't find the right word, and if you're not patient, then you drive right past what that person is trying to say. And ultimately, I think that we're the losers when we do that. We're missing out on really good contributions from our staff and our peers. And then I had to learn to avoid distractions. If I have a meeting with someone, and now that we're in a Zoom environment, sometimes I'm in a meeting and these are my just true confessions. I will pick my phone up and start like thinking about a million emails I need to answer. And sometimes it's so bad that I find myself, and this is just true, where I'm in a meeting and I'll start answering emails because, we get 1,000 emails in a day. And then somebody will say something that I need to answer. And I've been it's so bad that you're like, oh my goodness, you do it subconsciously. You don't even realize that you've started doing something else. So knowing that you have these issues and really working hard to stay present and in the moment is really, really important. And then other thing I had to learn is that my opinions and judgments are not the end all be all, and in most cases don't even matter. It's not about me. I need to spend that time really figuring out what conversation I'm having with this person and what the outcome of that conversation is. Does anybody have thoughts or anything you want to share before we move on? And I'm almost done with this presentation.
Well, we have marriage counseling going on over in the chat. We can catch you up on it, but everybody's kind of taking what you're sharing here, Mary, and they're applying it to their personal relationships. So Joe from Maryland had a particularly sort of pointed interpretation where he says, I'm still learning that I need to shut my mouth. After 42 years, my wife and children remind me of that every single day. So Deanna, well-known extrovert, has a thought maybe we'd like to hear from her. Or if Deanna's not ready to share, we could go to Amelia.
No, I was unmuting myself. Sorry. Well, I typed it up, but I was just remembering when I was first out of college, and the one job I got was at the university library, and an extrovert is not good at a library, but they liked my attention to detail because I'm also obsessed with the call letters that you put on books. That was my job, was unboxing things and putting the right call letters on there. And if you didn't get that wrong, no one ever finds that book. So it was very important, but I liked to talk while I was doing it. Well, they built me my own office in the stacks to keep me quiet. And it was only years later that they told me this, and when I came back to visit. But when I would come out of the office and bring them my new stacks of books, they were so glad to see me because they knew that it was for just a little bit and I would leave. But it taught me, looking back, it taught me that I would kind of store in my head the conversations I wanted to have, because walking through the stacks was a long haul, and I didn't want to do that for many, many times. And so I kind of learned to have purpose for my conversations at work. People have a million things going on, even if it's not an office where you have to be quiet. And that, I just, if I come out of my office, whether it's as an editor or back then as a, library processor, I have purpose for it. And then that there are other times for the chit chattiness. And I'm married to an introvert, and he kind of looks at me like a zoo animal because it's somebody, he likes to go to the zoo. But it can work. And he read a great book that says, an introvert and an extroverted life. If you've never read that, it's good for both sets. Anyway, I've said enough. I'll go back to my office.
No, that's really lovely. Thank you, Deanna. Mary, I want to line up our next three people. Amelia from Columbus, James from Detroit, and Manny from Austin. And Amelia, you had a couple of different posts, but I want to start with, I'm learning to watch my face. People sometimes misinterpret what I'm thinking. Tell us about how you do that.
Well, sometimes I have a look on my face because I'm listening to what they're saying that is not exactly what I'm actually thinking. And people, perceive what they perceive, and they come, up with conclusions that may not be true. And sometimes I am thinking things and I just don't want them to know what I'm actually thinking. So I'm being more aware of that. The nonverbal cues that we send to other people are sometimes even more important than the verbal ones, like Mary said earlier. So I'm just being more aware of what I'm putting out in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for sharing. I think there were a lot of nods of understanding and empathy about that issue as you were describing it. I wonder, gosh, if we all had a recording of our faces, what would we see? James, and there's a cue forming. This is great. James, you've shared a few different thoughts, particularly one on empathy. Do tell.
Yeah, we just, in dealing with some personnel issues here, where we had a couple of reporters who were just kind of struggling, and we weren't seeing their work frequently or consistently, and there were questions about, well, what's going on with this person, and in reaching out to them just on a phone call, not email or text or anything, but just on a more personal level, just to reach out and just asking them, it's like, hey, is everything okay with you? Not, getting into the conversation about, hey, how come I haven't seen your byline? But just asking them first, just person to person, human to human. And it's like, are you okay? And in starting the conversation that way, it kind of disarmed that person, because they kind of, when the boss calls, you think you're just in trouble. And so there's that natural inclination to just kind of be nervous. But I think it was refreshing for this reporter to have the boss call and just say, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? Is your family okay? I'm just worried about you as a person and want to make sure that we're good there. And that conversation went on for probably about 20 minutes. And this person expressed some personal issues that they were going through, that they, didn't want it to just be out there in the universe for everybody to tell. But it was important for them to be able to kind of release that and feel that it was okay. And it wasn't a sign of weakness, or it wasn't a sign that they were going to be in trouble, but letting them know that they had an advocate and not an adversary that they were talking to, and someone who was concerned about them as a person. And let's address that first, and then we can always talk about the professional, story later. But my biggest concern is just about you as a person.
James, that's so lovely. Thank you. And I want to link that back to a point Stan made about kind of laying the groundwork and doing your homework so that those types of things are available and they're not like a new move or a big surprise. My boss, Mizell Stewart III, when we have our team meetings, the first item on the agenda, it's Roman numeral 1, is gathering. And that could also be BS with one another. But it opens the lines of communication in the unlikely event that they're needed on something really, really important at the moment. And the same thing is true in our one-on-ones. The first thing is just sort of, how are you doing? And then we move on to Roman numeral 2, 3, and 4, which are about project this or task that or whatever. And so that he's built in an expectation that the first few minutes are to breathe, to share, to laugh, to go sort of off the agenda. And that's where we talk about, well, you know what, honestly, I'm a little stressed because the guy next door keeps mowing his yard every time I try to do a presentation. I'm running late. I need to move to the next room. Or my kid is struggling a little bit in school. I need to not be here tomorrow afternoon. And those things are all made easier by the fact that that's on the agenda every single time. So just it's a tip that I learned from him. Manny, let's go to you. You shared a couple of thoughts. Are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here. So what I would put out there is, again, using the term empathy. I've mentioned this in some other gatherings, but Satya Nadella, who's only the 3rd CEO of Microsoft, wrote in his book, the big trait that he looks when he was building continues to build his leadership team at Microsoft is empathy. And he says you can't put enough of a price on empathy. And what I put in the chat there was about that. Make sure that you look at those members of your team, regardless of rank or title, who are quieter. And I recall this from my time up at USA Today, when if you've been to the hub, you have the hub where everybody sits around, and traditionally it's been some more of the more extroverted journalists who sit around there, but then you have the folks sitting around the main desk. And one thing I've learned is that folks who are quiet, oftentimes they like to process, think through what's being discussed, and then offer solutions. I'm not speaking out of school because I've used her before. One of the leaders that I've worked with has been the news director in Naples, who has been Penny Fisher. Penny always has been long. She thinks through situations, she processes, and then she offers up constructive guidance. So I say make it a point, because I've worked with folks over the years who've been unfairly labeled as, well, they're just quiet. We've all heard that term. They're just quiet. They don't say anything. But the truth is, sometimes as you look over the course of their careers, where they've been called out and embarrassed and show cause. So make sure that you provide time and you give the opportunity to the quiet leaders and members of your newsroom to ask them in a non-threatening manner, what's your thoughts? Please share your constructive ideas.
Awesome. Thank you, Manny. And there's that word empathy again. Now, Mary, we've got a few minutes here to wrap up, but before we do, I just want to make sure that everybody who wanted to share has that opportunity. And I saw Chelsea and Matt speaking up, and Joe as well. Chelsea, did you want to share with us?
Well, it just, I've heard some of this information before, and I think it's really helpful to sit there and really give everyone your full attention when you're in a conversation. But in practice, I don't see it very often. It's not uncommon that I might be in a meeting and then a smaller group of people are having like a side conversation during that meeting, or I'm getting emails. It's just kind of, obviously you don't necessarily look to what others are doing to guide your own actions. You can only control what you do. But it's just kind of, I feel sometimes like I'm the outlier by not doing what everyone's doing in terms of 15 things during a meeting.
And if you are the outlier, it's probably in a good way. Maybe we could have you give us some tips on eliminating distractions and single tasking. which is probably pretty darn effective. But I don't think you're alone in that, and I hope you're not. Does anyone have a suggestion for Chelsea about how to lean into that and take advantage of that dynamic, or do something positive with it?
In terms of just kind of focusing on the moment.
And what I heard was some anxiety about why are other people doing, side conversations and 12 other things. Am I doing, Chelsea, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's kind of what I heard.
This is Lauren. I'll just jump in and say I feel you. It's actually really hard for me in team meetings.
No, I appreciate
that there's a chat happening while somebody's talking, so that you have to both read the chat and listen to the person. And so what we end up actually having is, you can't effectively both read and listen and share. And so it would be interesting in team Zoom meetings at, our respective papers and what have you. I don't know, it would be cool to think through that. Like, do we sometimes shut the chat function off, or just sort of raise hand for questions or something, so that maybe we're more intently focusing on one another?
Yeah, in terms of just some of the tactics that I use is, because it is not being able to sit down in a room with someone and have a face-to-face conversation makes it extra challenging to not multitask, for all the reasons that you're saying, just because, like you're reading the chat as you're talking. But in terms of what I've tried to do is, in the conversations, I take their first two critical minutes of the conversation to kind of assess, okay, is this an issue that is going to involve, say, some personal conversation? Is this an issue that involves a direct work issue? Is this something that is, for lack of a better term, what I like to call EB, or extraneous bullshit? And in those first couple of minutes, I kind of assess where the conversation is going. And then from there, I can say, okay, this is something that involves a personal issue as well as a personnel issue. I need to focus and be in this moment 100% with what's going on. And so then I make that determination I'm not going to follow the chats. I turn off the chat, so I'm not looking at it, and I'm just focused on what that person is talking about. But it's just a matter of doing some kind of self-assessment within the first couple of that conversation. Those first 2 minutes for me tend to be pretty critical in assessing that.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Lauren, she of the large Italian family. Okay, so I still want to hear from Matt and Mary. After we hear from Matt, I want to let you know we've got 6 minutes left. We promised to get folks out at 50 minutes past the hour. So Matt, was there something on active listening you wanted to share before Mary wraps up? And judging from the silence, you're either muted or so actively listening that you're not replying to me.
Which Matt are you talking about?
Oh, Matt LeClaire.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
You. I just made a point in the chat that it's really important as a leader to listen to the listening that's happening in the room, especially if you have junior managers or others. And when I was in the newsroom, I would, even if it's joining a team meeting or being part of other group conversations that are happening, to recognize if you and then if you know what you're looking for, you can spot a reporter or someone in the room who feels, or even a manager who doesn't feel like they're being heard by another manager, and take action. So.
Very good. Thanks, Matt. All right. Mary, we'd love to hear your summary thoughts after these last 45 minutes or so, because you've been doing a lot of listening.
I have, and I love this conversation, and this is exactly what I hope would happen so that I wouldn't have to hear myself talk for 50 minutes. So one thing I wanted to say is that I really a thing that I have learned to do, and I was doing it some during this conversation, and I don't encourage people to like then, doodle and write complete sentences. But like I felt myself wanting to jump in, like as people were making really good points, and I was jealous I couldn't get to the chat. But sometimes if you want to really jump in, like write one word, like, if it's something that's a really good point, just write one word or two words. Don't try and write an entire sentence, because then you're really distracted. If there is something important that you want to say, as you get into conversation. And the other thing is, I've learned in meetings, because I will interrupt people with my thoughts, because as soon as they come in my mind, I like want to say them. I've learned to mute myself until it's time for me to talk in meetings, which I actually did during this conversation, because everybody was making such good comments. And then so I just wrote like one word. And so those are just some extra things that are on my mind as I wrap this up. But write notes so that you don't interrupt the person. And that's like, when I say notes, I should have said words. Don't fill in sentences or offer words when someone is talking. Ask questions, but at the right time. Do not interrupt the person. End the conversation by asking if there's anything else that person want you to know, or any questions that they have. Make sure that you have time for the person. One of the things that I got really good about is, people will come by your office and want to talk, and you have 10 minutes before your next meeting. You don't know what that person might want to talk to you about. It could be, they could come in and you could not have any idea. They may be talking about taking another job, or they may be having a hard time with some issue, and you haven't scheduled the right amount of time to have that conversation with them. Or that you're expecting an important phone call, so you have to interrupt them. So I've learned to say to people when they come to my door and say, do you have a minute, or my desk, and say, is it urgent? If they say it's not urgent, I say, can I find you later, or can we schedule some time to talk? Because that way, when you are talking to someone, you're not distracted, and you're giving that person the time that they need to really have a real conversation with you. You're not worried about dinner or picking up your kids or whatever else is running through your mind. Like, you're really setting aside time to give that person the time they need to have a conversation with you. And in the end, you will have better conversations, and people will know that you're interested in hearing what they have to say. And I will just share this suggested reading list with you. And on this list is a book from one of my friends who is an introvert, because I was telling her about this conversation. And she's one of the people I have to practice my listening on. And so the other two books are books that I have personally read or listened to most recently on audiobook. So that's my suggested reading, and I'm done. And thank you all. And I want to come back and be a part of this group. So can I get back in, Mackenzie? Because this has been a long time.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. And yeah, you're once you're in the group, you're in for life. Mary's an alum, and as you can see, we brought her back to share, as we'll be doing with many of you. I'll be calling on you to speak on a topic that you're passionate about or expert in. And actually, that gives me a chance to just talk about what's happening tomorrow real quick. That is a book club with an author of a forthcoming book about he's a former Obama administration official, and his recommendations about what local media, what local journalists can do to reinforce some of the weakening parts of democracy. You're welcome to come to that tomorrow. That's going to be hosted by David Plazas of Tennessee, an alum of the program, and Mary Kelly Palka from Jacksonville. And if you come tomorrow, I will buy you and send you a signed copy of the book. If there are any books on Mary's reading list that you're interested in getting, I'll buy and send those for you as well. That's part of the program. So let me know if you want that. With that, I want to just say thanks, Mary, for taking the time to prepare, to share, and to listen, and to everybody else here for all the great questions and conversation. We'll see you tomorrow if you choose to for the book club. If not, we'll see you Thursday to kick off the 360-degree assessment program. Thanks, Mary, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.